Hello, everybody. Today we're going to do something a little bit special, I think. So I want to talk about the topic of why teams lose in Hell Let Loose. So I've seen some comments, and as far as my videos go, and I figured to maybe address this topic just from like a person who has commanded, 150 plus games or something like that. Maybe 200, 250. Gosh, I don't even know. A lot. But yeah, so I've been around the competitive scene for about 2.5 years, going on 3 here soon. But figured to just talk about this just from my perspective as to, why teams lose and Hell Let Loose. And then obviously, in order to win, you can do all these opposite things, pretty much. But maybe we'll do that in a separate video, or maybe we'll do it in this one. I don't know. So I just have this simple spreadsheet here, and we'll go through this, and I'm going to walk through some examples and see if we can nail them all down and see if we get them all. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let's go ahead and get started. So we have why teams lose. Let's go ahead and do a quick. We won't rank them yet. So let's start off with this here. Let's go to fragging. Right? Can your team win the gunfights? Okay, so sometimes, there's totally just unbalanced matches. I'll take an example of, let's say ESPT versus Ronin, right? Ronin will do a decent job as far as the opening goes, I think. But after the opening gets done and everything, I think ESPT will just outfrag them, outgun them, and then just pulverize them in a way, right? So when you're thinking about whether or not you can win a game, I would probably start with fragging because what is your team's KD ratios, or how do they stack up, you think? So that'd probably be the first thing I think of. And as long as you can have just put on more comments here, or do comments. So can you relatively stack up against the enemy team? And you could run Archon for things like that, so the history, and just kind of look at the history of fragging against other teams. And most teams you've in some way or another indirectly played each other. And so you can kind of compare your stats against the team that they fought and everything if you face that team, right? And you can kind of just see how everything lines up that way. Can you relatively stack up against enemy in a even manner? Proper English? I don't know. So let me just go ahead and move over a little bit. I know I'm starting at column F, probably a little bit weird. But okay, so we can you relatively stack up against enemy team in even manner, right? So fragging on the front line, can you win those fights, right? So let's go on here. So that would probably be number 1 for me right now, but we'll check out the rankings afterwards. Let me center that. Okay, all right. So fragging will be number 1 because that's going to determine so much, especially on your defensive squads, right? Can you at least win the KD battle on defense to give your front line time, or is your defense going to get annihilated and you're going to be forced to pull back your front line and wham, bam, shabamo, you're going to be down, a point or something like that, right? So let's talk about fragging go first. And then once again, these aren't any particular ranking just yet. We'll figure that out. But we'll go number 2, go with armor, right? So how well your armor plays. So there are many different styles of armor play. There are passive, aggressive, and sneak around tactics. And some teams are able to use their light tanks to a very good advantage by going around the back line and everything. And then you have, hey, Soprano, hey, buddy. So you have light tanks, shenanigans, and of course, when it comes to the armor heavy play, right? Because heavies are cost 600 fuel. And so how well is your team able to utilize resources as well? So we'll put that down as number 3. So resource utilization efficiency. I don't know if I spelled that right. If we go into review, utilization, there we go. Efficiency. Ooh, okay. Okay, so we have resource utilization efficiency. So heavy exchange, armor playing too risky. Okay, so is your armor able to stay back and support and kind of keep the enemy armor at bay, right? So it's not that they're winning exactly, but if they're able to hide in certain places and maybe cause a stalemate with the enemy armor, then the enemy armor knows they can't push, right? Because maybe it's 3-3 heavies or something like that, and they know if they move out of cover, then they're going to get screwed. You'll see this against teams like Oman, not Oman, the country, but Oman. So the team out of Germany, we've played a few times, and they've done this a few times. So they'll be down 2-3 in points. And 1 second here. So they'll be down 2-3, and then their armor will play really passively. And our armor can't push up because they'll know they'll get exposed, right? But the enemy armor doesn't actively try to engage your armor, right? So it's like a weird neutral standoff in a way. And obviously, armor's crew's going to get bored, right? And they're going to be prompted to make an aggressive push. So there's all types of strategies, right? So that could be a strategy where you just try to bore the enemy team beyond belief so they make risky plays because they're bored, right? And you take advantage of that. I mean, I think Omen in one game waited until the last 10 minutes. And our armor was trying to engage them, but they wouldn't move, right? And so armor finally got bored and pushed up. And I think they maybe knocked out one tank, but they lost all 3 tanks. And Omen pushed after that, right? Now we could squash their push, but still, I mean, there's different types of strategies. So how well your armor plays, heavy exchange, armor playing too risky, and we can utilize utilizing freemium tanks. Okay, so you're talking about the Shermans, the mediums, right? The lights, the recons. I mean, while your armor is, let's say we're down fuel, right? And you're waiting for fuel to be generated, then do your armor crews swap to infantry? Or did they say, hey, let's go grab that light tank, let's go grab that Puma, whatever, and let's see what we can make happen with that, right? And so there's a fine line there, right? Because you think about armor could switch to infantry and do a bunch of AT gun stuff, right? But I think that's a very key thing. Is your armor crew, are they always engaged? Are they active? And even when they're down tanks, are they able to, go into other roles and do that sort of thing? So something to keep in mind there. So you got to have very flexible and ingenuitive, I think that's a word, ingenuitive, yeah. Armor crews that say, hey, just because we don't have a heavy doesn't mean we can't, do something efficient with our time, right? Because think about it, they know how to knock out the tanks the best, at least in my opinion. So resource utilization efficiency, this commander attention span. So the commander, when you think about it, is responsible for the resource management, right? So are they converting? Are they paying attention to the timers for encouraged? And are they wasting bombing runs? Are they using strafing runs more than they need to? Are they dropping random airheads that have no purpose in being dropped? Because that's 400 manpower, right? And are they dropping ammo drops, supply drops when they don't need to? Are they running recon planes too excessively? So there's a big part to the game that not many people talk about is the commander's resource management ability. That's huge. It's huge. I mean, personally, I set timers during the game, right? And so I have a couple stopwatches essentially that tell me like, hey, 10-minute timer for encouraged, 5-minute timer for munitions and fuel and conversion, whatever you need to convert. And so you got to pay attention to that kind of stuff because the more resources you have available, obviously, the more you can do. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? And I think, it's sort of an underrated part of the game. Now, there's some teams that I think ESBT is some of their commanders drop airheads like there's no tomorrow. And so that kind of tells you like, hey, we're not dependent on spawning heavies, right? I think in one game they dropped 4 airheads. 4 airheads. I don't think I've ever dropped 4 airheads in a game. And these weren't like, very supportive airheads or anything like that. They were just random, hey, let's see if we can get something in the back line up, right? So that's 1,600 manpower, and I was astonished by that as a commander. But once again, it could be part of their just collective group, right? That commander knows he has more flexibility in his resources because he's not necessarily dependent. The team inherently isn't dependent on armor, right? If the armor crews can't get a heavy, it's fine, whatever. We don't care. They'll swap to infantry. They'll grab a medium. They'll grab a free tank, right? Whatever. So I always think that's kind of interesting, the different styles in which teams are okay. Now, me personally, I'm always paranoid that our armor crews won't have a heavy. So I always try to prioritize, hey, let's try to get a heavy or try to get much fuel as possible during the game. So I'm always ready to go with heavies. So yeah, resource utilization efficiency, very big. So we're going to put down misuse of bombing runs, strafing runs, airheads, that sort of thing, right? Let me go and expand this a little bit. There we go. Okay. All right. Okay, good. So I think we covered some really good bases so far. So let's go with, once again, no particular ranking here. We're just sort of guessing what this is going to be at the moment. Okay. So moving on here. So we have resource utilization efficiency, commander attention span, armor, how well your armor plays, fragging, da-da-da. Okay, let's talk about the opening. Opening truck snipes. Or we'll just talk about opening, right? So we'll talk about truck snipes, placement, infantry placement, understanding, Gary's. Well, Gary's could probably be a separate topic. So let's do 5 for Gary's. Gary's OP placement, team discipline. Okay, discipline. Gosh, my spelling is off today. Discipline. That's him. Discipline. All right, we're good. Hey, I can spell. Okay. So opening truck snipes, infantry placement, Gary OP. These two kind of play together, right? But in the opening, there are some maps, like PHL, for example, where if you have equal teams and one team is able to snipe the enemy trucks, so we played a match against Greyhounds on Purple Heart Lane in the seasonals last year, and we were able to snipe all their opening trucks, and so that puts their team on the back foot, right, for a map where the opening can count for so much, because during the opening, you are setting up shop, right? You don't have neither team has a foothold on anywhere, right? And so you have a chance to really make a play off the opening against a much better team, right? So many people, I think, did not think Helios was going to win that match. And I mean, to be honest, it would have been really close had neither team had any truck snipes off of the opening. It would have been close, I would say. The hard cap battle would have been pretty close. But in this case, we were able to have all 3 of their trucks go down in the opening, so they were forced to reset all the way in the back line, and they had a lot of ground to gain. And this gives us time, if truck snipes are successful, gives that team plenty of time to set up. So this goes for truck snipes for, with tanks, with rockets. So if you haven't seen, rocket snipes in competitive play, they're crazy. They're crazy. Teams will put a lot of time into that, to estimating where the enemy trucks will be coming out of. And you'll see just it's kind of cool when you go to driving in a game and stuff. You see maybe 6 or 7 rockets come in to the sky, and you're wondering if you're going to get hit. There's a few games I could bring up to show examples of, but we'll walk through some games here in a minute. But the truck snipes in some games are crazy. Teams will spend hours researching the perfect truck snipe. There are some really dedicated individuals out there who will try to find that perfect truck snipe. Okay, so opening truck snipes, infantry placement, Okay, so if truck snipes are successful, it gives the team plenty of time to set up, right? And then infantry placement as well. So you have to understand the terrain, right? Understanding the map. We'll do that. So you want to understand the map, which will dictate your infantry placement, right? And so with certain places, like here we have on the left hand or the right hand side, we have Helios versus, let me just put the volume on super low here. But if we, let me go ahead and wait till we have a zoomed in screenshot maybe.
Can I get one
Let me go ahead and maximize this here. But here, during this game, imagine if we just shoved all of our infantry right here, right in the middle, and just said, okay, just go forward, guys. We'll just rush a strong cap. So what happens is that we'll most likely cap. If we literally shove everything in the strong cap, we'll most likely cap, right? I mean, the weight of all the bodies will be kind of crazy. And so if we shove everything in the hard cap, we'll most likely cap. But you think about it, that cap is going to be short-lived because in this case, GBI would have would have church control up here. This is Omaha, by the way, for those of you who don't know. They'll have church control up here. And then they'll have all this up here, right? And then all this down here. And they'll be able to lay in crossfire like no tomorrow. They'll be setting up shop here with plenty of MGs around. And they'll be pouring fire into the point, to the back of the point, and they'll wipe us out. And meanwhile, artillery's falling on the point. Tanks are firing on the point, right? And so you're concentrated into that part, and you're not going to be able to get out of it pretty much. It's going to be crazy. So yeah, just keep in mind that. But understanding the terrain, right? So in this case, let's not go so extreme in as far as the team is just allocating in one certain spot, right? But in this case, we knew we had to allocate bodies up to church for that control. So potential springboard off, because hard cap is going to be contested on artillery battery a lot. And then to the south, you can't just ignore south because the enemy will sneak bodies behind the hedges and do a wrap around you, right? And so you got to understand how the terrain affects how many bodies you need in certain places, right? So if it's just wide open fields, you only need to dedicate a few bodies there. At least you should, most likely. But if there's a lot of urban and lots of buildings, like in St. Mary Glees, right, then you're probably going to want to dedicate a lot more bodies there because it's going to be pretty hectic. And certain few infantry won't be able to see that much of open space, right? So you got to keep that in mind as well. But in this case, just keep in mind like what the terrain looks like and understand how many bodies, according to your team skill level, you think you would need to hold that area, capture that area, or just maintain it, right? Because there's some areas where you have to strategically think, hey, we don't need this. We just need to hold this area so we don't get flanked, but we're not going to push this because it's a death sentence. But there are some areas where, okay, we have to take this because it gives us a vantage point to X, Y, and Z. So in the church, right, you have the massive church tower in Omaha, and you can look north, south, east, west, right, and really get a good lay of the land. And so we have to fight over that. If we don't, they're going to have excellent sight lines into whatever we're doing in the back line, right? Plus, they're going to be able to go to our fourth point pretty easily. So that's another thing too when it comes to the terrain, is that you want to understand where or which caps you think, hey, we have an advantage here, or we totally don't have an advantage. And so with artillery battery, off the opening, most teams do not have the advantage for the axis. The Allies most likely are going to cap first. They have all these buildings back here. They have just plenty of areas where they can get support from. Meanwhile, the Axis have a lot of open fields and stuff, right? And so it's not as friendly off of the opening as it is the Allies. And so for the recap, it takes a long time for the Axis to set up shop and smash this out. And then also the wrap as well. Because once again, a lot of buildings up here, a lot of spots for OPs and garrisons, And so there's a lot of chances for just them to rebound a little bit quicker. And plus, their armor can hide out a lot easier as well. So you got to keep those things in mind. So understanding the terrain is so important. Okay, so let's go back here. Just keep this open. Okay. Alrighty. So that's a little bit about Gary's OP placement and understanding the map. So when it comes to Gary's, you got to have discipline on your team to get up Gary's. You got to. If you don't have discipline to get up Gary's, then it's going to be no good, right? And so what's one of the common things we see in pub matches, right? We see teams not get up Gary's. That's probably the most common thing. Off of the opening, you don't get up any Gary's, and your team has nowhere to spawn on. And you're dependent on OPs, which could be wiped pretty easily. And it's just it's not good. So you got to keep those things in mind. When it comes to OP placement, you want to make sure your OPs are dispersed, right? And when it comes for Gary's and both OPs, it goes back to understanding the terrain, and when you're planning out where to put things, understand the crossfire lanes, understand the coverage for where you're putting your Gary's, where you're putting your OPs. Are the Gary's maximizing the tiles as much as possible, right? So are we getting 1, 2, 3 Gary's off the launch, right? So this Gary squad leads know not to put it in the middle here because that's going to force this other Gary to move up, right? And then same way for this one. So it's a staggering effect. And so it goes back to, once again, understanding the map and everything. So plan out your Gary positions and OP placements. You don't want them all bunched up. You want them all, try to spread them out as much as possible. And so that way you have a staggered network, right? And then when it comes to Gary's and OPs as well, you want to check your radar network, right? So radar network. So when it comes to the radar, you want to make sure that if you're able to disperse them as properly, then you're able to catch enemies who slip by, right? So in this case, Omaha's we're at a bottom to mid layout right now. Sorry, bottom to mid layout right now, and so we have a lot of ground to cover, right? So for those of you who watched my review of this game, one of the things I pointed out was this gap up here, right? We have no OP or Gary right there. So there was a missing spot where we could use an OP or Gary to catch them if they try to come by. Remember? So you don't want to leave those gaps in your line for the enemy to slip through. Leaving gaps in your line. Now, granted, you're not going to be able to cover everything, right? You can't have 500 garrisons on the map to capture everything. But the point is you disperse them enough where the enemy trips one, lights an OP up, lights a Gary up, and then they're able to, your team is able to respond to that. And so they see something light up, they redeploy, they head on that OP, they head on that Gary, and they're able to stop the enemy or find them wherever they are, right? So that's a whole kind of point of a good network, right? Okay, so I think we talked enough about that, but that was needed to cover that topic. Team disciplined, right? Does your team listen? That's what it comes down to. Or do they want to do their own thing? Okay. Does your team listen, or do they want to do their own thing? If you have players in a competitive team and they don't listen, you better get them off your roster if you can afford it, right? Because they're not helping anybody. If you have players that when asked to go support to build a Gary, they don't go support, right? Then tell them to go play pub match. They shouldn't be there. That's just like the cold hard truth as far as that goes. And so you just got to be very stern about that. I mean, as long as everybody listens to instructions and commands, that sort of thing, it should be okay. But against really good teams who have players that listen, they will steamroll over you. If you have random blueberries throughout the map, that let's say we have blueberries up here or something, right, that weren't doing anything, maybe squad lead running around back here, then yeah, I mean, get them out of the game, right? So you have to have a well-disciplined team in order to make sure that just everything is followed, and so as much as possible flows as smoothly as possible. That makes sense. So that's what you got to ask yourself. If your commander especially, does your team listen? Do they go support when you need to? Do squad leads respond when you need to get up a Gary? Right? Do cells respond when you need to get up a Gary? Okay. And do they coordinate themselves? Hey, I need somebody to go support. Hey, I need to go over here, right? Or do they just ignore you and try to go frag, right? Come on. What are we doing here? Do we want to win or lose? Now, I know it's a game, but winning is a part of it. All right. So do SLs respond when you need to go up a Gary? Do people respond when you need to go AT? Just do they listen to you? Right? Keep that in mind. If not, I mean, this is a core principle that you can, relay to your team in a way. Okay. Once again, these are in no particular ranking at the moment. We'll figure out that ranking afterwards. So team discipline. Okay. And now let's go to number 7, defensive response. Defensive response. This one is a biggie, I think. This one's a biggie. The reason why I say it's a biggie is because a lot of the times when you see teams lose a point in lose competitive play, or in pub matches for that matter, you see the team that loses not respond to a threat, right? So everyone just stays on the attack. Everyone just stays on the attack. Just attack. No HUD. No communication. Okay, so those are probably, or the underestimation, right? Underestimation. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so everyone just stays on the attack, and it goes back to the discipline on your team as far as seeing who listens, right? So it's very, very key to pay attention to. But when you're losing a defensive point, the communication has to be there, right? Because some people don't play with their HUDs on. It's just a fact of the game, right? Now, being commander, I always play with my HUD on. I mean, that's just a natural thing for me. But I think when you're in a game and chaos is going on, some people have leadership chat pub matches, right? They have leadership chat muted. They don't care. And so everyone's on the attack. I mean, I've seen some terrible matches. Where nobody wants to play defense and nobody goes back to help defense, and you lose the point, right? And people get upset, like, oh, the commander sucks or something, right? Like, how does that make sense? So that's pretty, the communication part is big. And when it comes to competitive play, it's probably the underestimation piece. There's so many times where you see a team that they call, or they get pressure on their fourth point, and then someone says, hey, it's not that serious, just a couple guys. Oh my God. That saying of it's just a couple guys. Gosh, that's probably been echoed in Let Loose competitive play hundreds of times. But it's one thing where you want to see, it's better to not overreact, but send extra bodies back. There's a difference between overreacting and sending extra bodies back than not sending anybody back at all. So at least in my opinion, if the defense is losing some key frags, then you got to send maybe a squad back, right? And just to get some extra pressure back there, or extra fills to make sure you cover your bases, because it's so difficult 99% of the time when you lose a point and you go down for 1-4, right? Versus being able to stay in the game at 2-3. There's just so much, right? There's so much extra work the team has to do. It's a morale hit. And there's been some teams, I think WTH versus IR was a good example, where after they lost. They didn't react properly enough to the first push on their fourth point, and they lost it. I think it was Cemetery on SME. And IR was able to take advantage of that, and it took WTH a long time to get it back, and it cost them a whole bunch of time. Then the second time, they responded back with enough force and everything, but still, they lost a lot of time not responding properly. So it was just one example I just wanted to give there of, and Helios had in this game of not responding properly as well, right? So if we go skip ahead here real quick. Okay, so in this case, the security on the perimeter and everything wasn't properly maintained, wasn't the greatest, and some key frags were lost, which allowed them to free up their Garys. And so in our red zone, right, it's 100 meters, and so they had some open space up here where they can launch into. And so before this, there are certain games for whatever reason where I sort of freeze in command chat, like I don't say anything. It's super weird. I don't know what it is. I don't know if other commanders have that issue, but I don't say anything. And I have no idea. I mean, I'm getting better at it, but there are some games where it just seems like my words are caught in my throat, and I should say, "Hey, everybody, we got to pull back. Screw the attack. We can't lose this point, right?" And so here on Church Road, we only had a few OPs over here and one Gary back here, right? But we should have called back a whole bunch more because GBI in this case had a whole bunch of terrain to play with, and we're able to push right into the point. So there's an example of Helios not responding effectively because it's much easier to nip it in the butt right out the beginning than it is to lose the point and try to recapture it. I mean, it's a pretty obvious statement, but then just something to ingrain in your mind. So underestimation, just at least in my opinion, always send extra bodies back versus not enough body or just a few bodies. Just to make sure you're good, because the defense can lead a whole bunch of extra time for the front line to continue attacking once everything's settled. So defensive response, team discipline, Gary's OP placement, opening truck snipes, infantry placement, understanding the map, resource utilization efficiency, armor, how well your armor plays, right? Are they just throwing away heavies? Are they utilizing their downtime effectively, right? And then fragging, winning your gunfights. So let's go with number 8 here. Let's go with number 8. Let's go with utilizing or map. Let's go with map positioning. Taking advantage situations. Taking advantage of situations. Okay. So these are breakthrough opportunities. Oof. So taking advantage of situations, right? Now, this is something where this takes a team a long time to get used to in a way, but your SLs have to be able to communicate that there is a breakthrough going on or the enemy has no presence here. And this goes along the line with flares, right? So flares, recon plane, recon armor advantage. So taking advantage of situations, breakthrough opportunities. And so I think this comes into play with just experience into knowing, hey, we're not encountering any resistance here. We need to dedicate a lot more bodies here because we have a chance for a breakthrough, right? So in this case, if we go, let's go back a little bit here to the opening. So in this case, we have good defensive. I mean, this is right after the opening, right? So we're okay on the defense at the moment. And so we have bodies dispersed a whole bunch of different places, right? But let's say, for example, the OP here. So we'll go to, in the main point here, if they were able, or we'll actually go to the north. So if these guys were able to push and wipe out the roads right here and everything, then they would be able to, let's say, set up shop back here in the F column. And if it was just still the few guys and with their OPs, and we didn't take advantage of that, that would be terrible. And so if they were able to push up, get this ground and say, hey, we're not meeting any resistance here. We have a chance to flood north, right, down to south. But we have a lot of our extra bodies here, and we didn't reallocate it. That'd be kind of dumb, right? Because these guys in the middle are just bashing their head against artillery and tanks and just the mid-cap, right, in general. And if we wouldn't take advantage of that, then that'd be, no good. So if these guys were able to set up their OPs back here and say, hey, in command chat, we're not encountering any real resistance here. We wiped out their Garys. We should be good. Then we would flood their OPs with as many bodies as possible. Because remember, our 4th point is up here. And so we have all this ground down here to give for a very rare opportunity. And our tanks will still be back there. So our tanks can handle some infantry. And of course, maybe a couple bodies of infantry will be able to stay back, right? But we would have to be able to overload those OPs in the northeast to take advantage of those, right? So it's all about recognizing the opportunity, like, hey, there's a chance here. And that goes back to the communication piece for your squad leads to call out to say, hey, we have an opportunity here, so let's take advantage of it. And then, of course, relates back to discipline. Does your team respond to those calls to take advantage of certain situations, or do they just keep doing their own thing, right? That's because time is of the essence. If Helios has an advantage against ESPT in a game and we only have 10 seconds to make the decision, we got to go, right? Because ESPT is fantastic on defense. They have great radar. They spot you, right? And if there's ever an opportunity where we have a Gary free and we can sacrifice 10, 15 guys to go spawn on that, then you better believe we're going to take it. Like there's going to be no ifs, ands, or buts. You have to be able to take that chance and just go for it, because those opportunities against really good teams are very rare, very, very rare, because most of the time, their defense is really on top of it. Okay, so we'll go back here. So back to the list. So taking advantage situations, flares. So it goes back to discipline, right? Is your recon team popping flares when you need to, right? Does your team drop expo boxes when they need to? So there should be expo boxes for your recon team all over the place. And so that way your recon team doesn't have to redeploy. They can just go to the expo box and get reload and everything, right? Because think about it, the more flares you have, that frees up 150 munitions. I think it's 150 for recon. 150 or 100? Gosh, I forget. Damn it. I think it's 150. But it frees up you to not use the recon, or you can use recon in another spot, right? And then, of course, armor. So it goes back to number 2 right there. So if your armor is playing really well, they should have a pretty damn good idea as far as how their armor advantage is playing out at the moment. And so are they up 2 tanks? Are they up 2 heavies? Are they up 3 heavies? Are they going to take advantage of this? Because armor rarely has an opportunity to push across open fields without worrying about getting popped, right? So as long as they're keeping track of the armor advantage, now you can calculate all this, right? I mean, I have a fuel calculator myself that basically tells us the max amount of heavies that a team theoretically could have. But of course, it depends on the enemy commander's ability to convert munitions and all that, or convert to fuel for that kind of stuff. So you can think of it that way too. So armor advantage. Okay. So let's see here. We have fragging. Can your team win the gunfight? So that's probably, I'm going to say that's number 1 because that determines so much within a game. And, taking advantage of situations. So break airheads as well, right? So airheads, just real quick there. But airheads, of course, oh my gosh. Sometimes you get lucky and competitive and you're able to get a backline airhead, if you will, and take advantage of that and stuff. But other times it's you're just not able to really use them that much. But in the rare case you do have a chance to take advantage of those airhead plays. Okay. Let's see. Is there anything else here we can cover? Can you stack up against enemy even manner, armor, how well your armor plays, resource utilization efficiency, commander attention span, misuse of bombing runs, strafing runs, all that kind of stuff, right? And then airheads as well. Opening truck snipes, infantry placement, understanding the map. Truck snipes are successful. You got to tell your team to gain that ground and take advantage of it. So it goes back to communication, right? And gives your team the time to set up shop, and so they can wait for the enemy once they get to certain parts, right? And then wipe them out and push and gain that ground. Gary's OP placement radar network. So leaving gaps in your line allows the enemy to slip through, and next thing you know, a 1 squad lead becomes 2 squad leads and 3 squad leads, and then then there's 20 people on your point. Team discipline. Does your team listen? Ask yourself this honestly. Do they listen? Or do they want to go do their own thing? Right? Do SLs respond when you need to get up a Gary, for example? Do SLs communicate when for supply drops, for enemy airheads, for all that kind of stuff? Are they paying attention to the map? And then are they understanding that how their position impacts the map situation? So very, very key. Defensive response. Does everyone just stay on the attack and ignore? Do they have their HUDs on? If they don't have their HUDs on, then are they getting communication to tell them that, hey, we need to go back to the point. They need help there. Or is the team underestimating the enemy threat, right? And next thing you know, 3 SLs slipping through becomes 18 bodies. 6 guys per OP. So very, very key. Taking advantage of situations, breakthrough opportunities. If you don't do this, then yeah, you're most likely going to lose. If you're up on 80% cap on a point and you don't tell everybody in the defense, so if you have 8 or 9 guys playing defense, you don't tell all those guys to get on the attack, then you're not fully taking advantage of the situation, right? So we'll go with number 9 here, proper use of commander abilities. So this will be sort of with number 3, right? But reinforce is probably number 1 thing I see for teams that lose when it comes to commander abilities. Now, this is just part of the education factor, because a lot of people just jump into this game and don't really research what's true and what's not true. But reinforce doesn't do anything if you don't have bodies in the circle. Literally doesn't do anything. So don't use it. And if you feel your team doesn't have a chance of really holding on to the point, and it comes back to understanding the map positioning, then don't use it. Don't waste that 200 manpower. Because once again, resource utilization, efficiency. And so really hold on to that reinforce until you absolutely need it. Or if you think you have a strong chance of holding the point, if you have like 10 guys in the circle and you're still losing it, and you look at the positioning, like, okay, we have armor and support, we have these squads in support, right? Then yeah, drop the reinforce. Drop it. And then it comes down to timing as well, right? So you don't want to drop a reinforce with 8 minutes left to go when you have no pressure on the point, right? You want to wait until probably, some people say the 4-minute mark to get to the 2-minute mark. Now to me that's, I'd rather wait until the 3-minute mark if there's absolutely no pressure at the 4-minute mark, right? So that way you have an extra buffer. Because remember, if the enemy starts capping at the 3-minute mark, right, then the reinforce is going to run out the 2-minute mark if you've dropped it at the 4-minute mark. And your team's going to be 1 minute without reinforce, right? And so all that time, remember, you're assuming that the bodies are in the circle. Thank you, Covenant. So you want to make sure you utilize reinforce properly. And then, of course, Dismantle garrison. So over there I have the dismantle garrison at the top, right? So this is one where it's 100 manpower, but 100 manpower can add up. 100 manpower can add up. And that's where you got to think, can I just redeploy as commander and get over there, right? And just dismantle Gary myself? Do I need to use 100 manpower, right? Half tracks. Half tracks are like, this is such a controversial topic, I feel. But half tracks are such a, 300 fuel. It depends on the team's appetite, I would have to say. It depends on the team's appetite for armor. I'll give the example of ESPT. Once again, I've seen them within the game that I dropped 4 airheads, and I was thinking, oh my God, how could they possibly be dropping 4 airheads? Their armor crews must be starving, right? Or maybe they were just ungodly winning the frag battle, right? And so they have all that extra manpower. But half tracks are, for me, like a desperation play or a very unique play. I think in WTH's game versus IR, the one they went down 1-4 on SME, Commander House Gangsta dropped a half track and drove all the way up to Hospice and parked that puppy ready to go while they were still down 1-4. And so that way, when they captured the 4th point, they would essentially the half track would start the cooldown timer and be ready to go to launch the team on 4th or mid cap, right? So that was really interesting. Smart play. Half track didn't go detected, obviously, but I think WTH almost had a shot there at recapturing Hospice against IR during that game. So proper use of commander abilities. I don't think there's really anything else here that I'm anything really questioned about. I mean, bombing run, precision strike, strafing run. Really don't use that unless absolutely desperate. Maybe off the opening to get a few SLs, but it's 150 munitions and you're going to get, unless it's like an all-in attack for the last minute, right? But it's very, very rare that I'll use a strafing run, even to protect a backline Gary. To me, it's just, I don't know. If you have any thoughts, just let me know. But, bombing runs. For bombing runs, I like to save them for just the last, just very, very special moments and to always have them in my back pocket, if you will, because they're 10-minute cooldowns and you want to use them to bolster an attack that's really close to capturing the point, or, of course, save them for defensive pressure that was unexpected, right? So you got to always have that ace in your back pocket. Ace in your back pocket? I think that's a saying. Gosh, I always forget these things. But ace in your back pocket for a bombing run. It's because, once again, 10-minute cooldown. So you want to have that ready to go when you feel like you could have a chance. Now, in competitive play, don't be shocked if your bombing run gets 1 or 2 kills. I've casted probably 50 plus games. I don't think I've seen a bombing run get more than 5 kills. No matter the commander, no matter the team, no matter how good they are, you just won't see infantry is dispersed. They're moving all around, right? The bombing run has a small AoE effect, but not a massive AoE effect. But it's so random. The main thing you're going for there is to disrupt the enemy, not necessarily for kills, but just to cause chaos, right? Because if your team is pushing, a bombing run comes in, think about the enemy team. The infantry are hearing these bombs all around, communication's a little bit flustered, unless they have their SFX at 0 or really low. But it's just meant to cause chaos, maybe get a garrison, maybe wipe out some supplies, maybe kill a few repair stations, maybe damage some tanks, right? But it's not necessarily meant for the kills, it's just the overall effect of the bombing run. And then you combine that with an airhead maybe just to cause some further chaos, right? And then precision strike. Precision strike is another little bugaboo there. But 250 munitions for a 20-minute cooldown to get the tank, right? So you got to have like a pinpoint accuracy for that tank marker in order to want to use precision strike, at least in my opinion. It's you want to save it for a rainy day, essentially. And just see what just what situations come about. It's not something I use randomly. It's more so just something you want to save for when your tanks get a good marker. Now, I've had the cool part of having my or being in the position to capture or see tanks pretty close and use the precision strike and get like 100% accurate mark, right? So you just want to have that in your back pocket, at least in my opinion. So the misuse of those abilities, essentially. So this should essentially be reinforce, bombing run, and then you have your strafing run. Once again, goes back to number 3, right? And then your precision strike. Okay. So those are the different. Yeah, so those are the different things. I think we're out of. 1 through 9. I think it pretty much covers all the reasons why teams lose. I think that covers it. I can't think of anything more off the top of my head, but hopefully this can serve as a reference guide to any new teams out there, or maybe any commanders or squad leads that are starting off in Hell Let Loose, and they can use this as sort of their go-to guide. But let's go. Let's see if I could rank these. Right? Let's see if we could rank them. So fragging to me has to be number 1. Has to be number 1. I don't think there's anything that beats fragging as far as Hell Let Loose goes. If your team can't win gunfights, then no matter how everything else is going, it's just not going to work because you're going to lose so much ground and you're going to get wiped, right? So fragging has to be number 1. Number 2, gosh, I think I'm going to have to go with team discipline. So let's go with that. Let me just delete all these other rankings temporarily. So go with team discipline. So you can have really good fraggers, right? That may not listen and you may win the game. Okay, I'm going to say a bold statement right there. But if you have okay fraggers, but, well, gosh, I don't know. If you have really good fraggers but nobody listens, then you may still lose the game. Because if people aren't going support when they need to, they just want to frag, build Garys, etc., then, your team still may lose. Yeah. So team discipline is huge. Yeah, it's 1 or 2, man. That's a close one. So if you have 500 confidence on a team, or 49 confidence on a team, you may win if nobody loses. Okay, so those of you who don't know, Covenant is one of the top shooters in Helios. ESPT pays him a fat sum per game. So I think it's 6+ figures. Pretty crazy. So opening, truck snipes, resource utilization efficiency. Gary's OP. Let's go with let's go with number 3 for Gary's OP placement. So for Gary's OP placement, I think that has to be number 3, just as far as you can have really good fraggers. You can have, as long as you have good fraggers, team discipline, you can get those Garys up, right? So we'll keep that as number 3, Gary OP placement. And so as long as your team, let's say, is winning those frag fights, then they're going to have space to put those OPs, put those Garys, and protect those OPs and Garys, right? Okay. So let's go with number 4 for armor, right? So you may not have the most resources, but your armor plays conservatively. They know when to peak and everything, right? And so resource utilization efficiency may not matter as much. And so they may be okay. And armor may win. Think about it. If the armor is able to push the point and wipe out the enemy and support the fragging, awesome fragging ability, then your team's going to do very well, right? So, yeah. So go number 4 for armor. And then think about number 1 for fragging as well, is that if your team's able to out-frag the other team like crazy, even though if they have good armor, those fraggers are going to get around those tanks Tanks won't have infantry support, and rocket the hell out of them, satchel the hell out of them, so that armor won't. Armor needs infantry support unless you're on like Foy or something, right? Foy or I would just go with Foy or Kursk. Could be another one. So there are some map exceptions here, I guess you could say. Okay, so for number 5, let's go with. Gosh, I'm going to go with opening. Let's go with the opening. So if your team preps the hell out of the opening, right, with truck snipes, infantry placement, understanding the map, all that kind of stuff, with following along with all the other things, then you have a pretty good chance of winning, I would say. Because if the other team does no prep, right, so why teams lose, then they're going to be in the wrong positions, and you're going to have proper crossfire lanes. Maybe you have awesome truck snipes, right? And you're going to really put the enemy team on the back foot. If you don't understand the power points to control during the game or on the map, then the enemy team's going to know what those are, especially for LOS, right, for line of sight. And the ability to have MG spots, oh my gosh. Like those MGs are going to have the perfect sight lines for the team. And they're going to be able to really hamper your team down, right? And so I think, though, kind of putting this number 5th, right? But if you're able to have fragging and armor, then that sort of, is outweighing the part here. If if a bad team has a good opening, if a bad team has a really good, if a team has a really bad opening but has really good fragging and armor, they'll be able to outweigh that a little bit, right? But yeah, so opening truck snipes, opening just for understanding the map and everything, and getting everything set up. It's very key. Okay, so let's go with resource utilization and efficiency for number 6, I think. And because I think if you're wasting resources on the commander resource or the abilities, then you're not going to have. You're just not going to have. You're not going to have them when you need them, right? You're not going to have that bombing run for the for the breakthrough moment, and it's really just going to hamper just the team's ability to take advantage of those situations, right? And so if the commander's not using encouraged, right, you're not getting your heavies up. If armor doesn't want to take any risks because they know fuel's low, because the commander is forgetting to use encourage and generate fuel and all that kind of stuff, then it's just a lot of people are SOL, right? And so and an arty, like let's say arty accidentally, you have enough munitions for artillery. Oh my gosh! In competitive Helios right now, you have one arty guy on the gun, right? So munitions you have a little bit more to spare. But suddenly you don't have arty control. Oh my gosh, we didn't talk about arty. How could I forget about arty? Proper arty play. Proper arty play? Not sure if that's the right one. So proper arty play, dropping in the right spot. Do they understand the map? So actually, gosh, this may change up the rankings. We'll go put this in number 7, actually. Okay. I know there are a few arty players that may be triggered by that. But arty with one gun is able to cover one lane. I think the teams can adapt to that, right? So most of the time during games, teams will call out, like, arty's falling here. We have a chance to shift bodies over there, right? So I'm going to say number 7 for arty play. But, yeah. So we'll talk about that here in a second. Let's go through the rest of these rankings real quick. Defensive response, we'll go with number 8. And then the resource efficient, we'll keep these in number 6 and 6. I think they're kind of together, right? So they're mixed, I think, in between. So these two will be together. I don't think we could really differentiate those. I think they're going to be about the same. Taking advantage situations, we'll keep this at number 9, I think, for right now at least. So let's do a quick ranking and see how these. Okay, so let's see how these worked out here. So fragging number 1, I think, is by far ESPT versus Ronin is I think, a good example. WTH versus Ronin. It can mean, I'm sorry to pick on Ronin. Oh my God. Let's go with Merc. WTH versus Merc or something, right? So WTH will have a much better, at least in my opinion, overall KD ratio, and being able to understand that. Team discipline. Does your team listen? Do they want to do their own thing, right? So that, to me, number 2 right there, because sometimes you have a bunch of really great fraggers who don't give a hell, or give a crap about what's going on during the game, and they just want to do their thing, right? So a little fine balance there. Number 3, Gary OP placement, radar network, leaving gaps in your line, enemies slip through, right? And that sort of plays down into number 8 in a way, right? So you want to have a proper radar network. Okay. Number 4, how well your armor plays. Are they having a proper heavy exchange? Or is armor playing too risky? Are they utilizing the freemium tanks, right? Or are they just lackadaisically going across the map and just lounging on the bench chairs and taking in the sunshine, maybe drinking some wine and waiting for you to have 600 fuel left as commander to spawn them another heavy? So yeah, just thing to keep in mind there. How well does your armor crews utilize their time, and do they, because there's a certain appetite for risky plays, right? Because of how expensive armor can get during the game. So yeah. Opening truck snipes, infantry placement, understand the map. You got to understand the map, the key MG spots and AT gun spots, all that kind of stuff, right? And yeah, just it's such a key part, because sometimes the enemy team won't know about a certain AT gun spot, and they'll get wiped, right? And their armor will be totally not expecting it. Resource utilization efficiency, proper use of commander abilities. So these two kind of go together, at least in my opinion. And commander attention span, misuse of bombing runs, strafing runs, reinforce, bombing runs, strafe, right? But you got to use the abilities you got to learn when to use the abilities at the right time. Very key there. Proper use, proper arty play. Do they understand the map? Are they dropping arty in the middle of the field? Or most likely, the competitive team, the enemy, won't be sending any bodies whatsoever. Arty has the power to shut down certain lanes, right? And so you got to have an arty player that knows what they're doing. And also, can they F1, F2 pretty quickly? And also, is already communicating to the team what they're doing, right? Defensive response. Everyone just stays on the attack. No HUD, no communication, So you got to be able to pull bodies back when you're under defensive pressure, right? It's better to send extra bodies back than it is to send too few bodies back. Very key there. And number 9, taking advantage of situations, breakthrough opportunities. And I say this because it's probably not I would say it's probably the rarest of them all. I would say these abilities and these situations up here are the most common things you see. But the breakthrough opportunities, such as like a whammo Gary, a Gary on the far edge of the map where you have opportunity to get behind the enemy. So that those are rare, but you got to learn when to take advantage of those, right? And if you're down 2-3 with, 10 minutes left to go, you have to understand that maybe this is your last shot left in the game to take advantage of it. So, yeah, buckle up, cowboy, and get in that saddle and take that chance. Okay. All right, so I think those are the 9 things as far as why teams lose in Hell Let Loose, right? I think I covered, and once again, I've commanded 150 games, maybe 200 games. I have no idea how many games I commanded. But in all the times and all the games and everything that you see, I think this is probably a good summary. If you're a new competitive team out there, like things to really lay down the foundation principles on, and to build your team off of, and get more teams in this community, maybe. So yeah, that's it, everybody. I think that will be a good coverage for why teams lose. But if you disagree, feel free to let me know. And yeah, okay. But anyways, I think this will be a good refresher. I will. Okay. I will catch you all next time. Thank you for joining me, everybody.